John Stuart Mill, who lived from 1806 to 1873, became an outstanding philosopher and economist. He's believed to have had perhaps the highest IQ of any person who has ever lived. So unless you think you're smarter, pay attention. John Stuart Mill said, "Those only are happy who have their minds fixed on some object other than their own happiness. On the happiness of others, on the improvement of mankind, even on some art or pursuit, followed not as a means, but as itself an ideal end. Aiming thus at something else, they find happiness by the way." Okay, to my mind, there's no doubt whatever that is the true and only lasting path to lasting and meaningful happiness. The definition is so excellent, and people so often seem to be confused as to what happiness is all about. Let me repeat it. Those only are happy who have their minds fixed on some object other than their own happiness, on the happiness of others, on the improvement of mankind, even on some art or pursuit, followed not as a means, but as itself an ideal end. Aiming thus at something else, they find happiness by the way. I wonder why that isn't taught in school. I believe it's safe to say that not one person in 5,000 could give you an intelligent definition of what true happiness is all about. We must have our minds fixed on something other than happiness in order to find it. If we seek it directly, it will elude us forever. People say, "I want to be happy," as though it's something that can be done to them, whether they do anything about it or not. Such people can never know happiness until they break out of the tiny world of themselves. Those only are happy who have their minds fixed on some object other than their own happiness. Therein lies the secret. The happiest people are usually the busiest people, almost always those whose business consists of serving others in some way. By losing themselves in what they're doing and where they're going, happiness quietly joins them and becomes a part of them. The miserable, unhappy people who cause such misery and unhappiness to others are the self-centered people, people who worry constantly about what they're getting out of it, rather than what they're giving. And the world is chuck-a-bang full of them. Unfortunately, we see their harried, unhappy, furtive, ferret-like faces everywhere, pushing, their grasping hands extended. They fear life, they fear death, they're the pitiful caricatures of humanity, and they pay a terrible price for their ignorance. All right, no more mystery then as to what happiness is all about. If you're not happy, it's because you're not meeting John Stuart Mill's simple directions and definition. If you do qualify, you're a happy person. The thing I like about the definition, other than the fact that it's the best I've ever found, is that it places the responsibility for happiness directly where it belongs. I was staying at a resort hotel, the Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island in northern Michigan. One evening after dinner, I settled myself comfortably in a chair on the porch that runs the entire length of the oak frame hotel. Supposedly, it's the longest porch in the world, just to relax and enjoy the delightful evening. There was a light breeze and a good moon. The lake was beautiful, and the lights of the passing ships could be seen. The evergreens stood out clearly in the moonlight, and it was altogether one of those really great times you remember. Before long, a young couple came strolling down the long porch. They were walking arm in arm, and I thought that they were all that was needed to make the picture complete. They walked slowly by me and then took seats not far away. They were silent for a moment, and I naturally thought that they were enjoying the remarkable beauty of the scene and the night as much as I was, when the young woman spoke. I know these were her exact words because I wrote them down as soon as I could stop laughing. She said, "I hate the smell of horses." There are no automobiles on Mackinac Island. All the transportation is done with horses, and they naturally lend their own unique flavoring to the island's atmosphere. I found it charming, and a lot less irritating than the noise and fumes of cars, taxis, and trucks. But what made me laugh, of course, was that in the midst of all that beauty on one of the most beautiful evenings of the year, in so romantic and charming a setting, the only thing the young woman noticed that was worth mentioning was the faint odor of horses. They looked at me in surprise when I laughed, so I had to explain why, which neither of them found to be amusing at all. In fact, the young woman seemed somehow offended, and they soon moved away from the strange character who not only eavesdropped, but also laughed at them. The sad thing about it all was that the attractive young woman belongs to that vast army whose members make it their business to spend their lives focusing on the wrong things. I'll bet if the young man gave her a string of pearls, she'd busy herself with a minute inspection of the clasp. On a beautiful day, such people can spot that tiny cloud on the horizon. They don't appreciate the good qualities in people, but complain about their defects. If their children bring home report cards with 5 B's and 1 C, it's the C that'll get the comments and the attention. They don't look for what's right, but what's wrong. In a world of miracles and beauty, they see only horse droppings. If you mention this to them, they'll usually say you have your head in the sand, and they have it all backwards. Recreation should be recreation, a time so spent that we can reevaluate things, our lives, our work, our goals, our reasons for living, our service, our contribution, our education, our hobbies, our enjoyment of ourselves and others. A round of golf, great as it is, simply is not time enough, nor are a few sets of tennis or an afternoon poking around in the garden. We need more time than that. Several days, a couple of weeks or longer, and on a regular basis. For me, it's getting on the water in a boat. It's wearing comfortable old clothes and sailing out of sight of land with just the sea and the wind and the sky. And it's puttering and fixing things around the boat, sanding and varnishing and making little improvements. There's the therapy of the fresh air, the sea itself, the elements, and it's using your two hands, the most versatile instruments on earth, and the tools they've fashioned to help. Everyone has his own way, or should have his own way, of recreating himself, of renewing himself, so that he can turn again to the necessary pursuits of living with new interest and enthusiasm. What's yours? With one friend of mine, it's growing tomatoes. For others, it's painting or cooking or mountain climbing or fishing or camping or traveling. Everyone needs recreation in its true sense. Robert Ardrey points out in his marvelous book, The Social Contract, that the three most important factors to any human being are, in this order, number one, identity, recognition as a separate, original human being. Number two, stimulation, change, the opposite of boredom. And number three, security, the opposite of anxiety. Well, this recreation business comes under headings 1 and 2 and most certainly helps us establish number 3. That is, occasional renewal helps us find ourselves, reestablish just who we are and what we want. So it helps with our identity problem. It most certainly involves change, stimulation, the opposite of boredom. And it helps us develop inner security, the only kind that's worth anything anyway. If a person has this inner security, real security as a person, his world can come crashing down all around him and he can still emerge secure within himself and build a new and possibly better one. So when you find yourself getting stale, you need some meaningful recreation. You need to stop the world and get off for a while and look back at it as a man from Mars might. It's surprising the new ideas you'll get, and good ones, the new opportunities you'll see. Opportunities that have been lying about in your own backyard, in your own work and world that you were a little too close to the forest to see before. And when you're lost in the recreation you love, you're really living. You're living as fully as it's possible to live. And you know, that's the whole idea, isn't it? Have you noticed how most people seem to be waiting to be happy in the future? They seem to be so intent on getting through the day, they forget to enjoy it. It's as though happiness is a distant city to them, a city they're striving to reach. But happiness is something that must be learned and practiced if we're to become skilled at it. Pushing it out into the indeterminate future involves running the risk that we won't know how to be happy when we get there. It's like saying, someday when I can afford to buy a piano, I'll sit down and play beautiful music. It doesn't work that way. Owning a piano doesn't confer the knowledge of how to play. And arriving at a particular stage of life, whether it's measured in terms of age or income, doesn't mean that we'll suddenly become happy people. A reporter interviewing J. Paul Getty, who could at that time have cashed in his chips for several $1 billion, asked, "Mr. Getty, what is it that money cannot buy?" And he replied, "I don't think it can buy health, and I don't think it can buy a good time. Some of the best times I ever had didn't cost me any money." The fact is that most of the ingredients necessary for happiness are present in the lives of most people every day. They're things and conditions for which we need not wait. They're ours today. And most of them are things we're so used to, we take them for granted. They're the people with whom we live and work, our children, our homes. There's the anticipation of the day and what it will bring. The opportunity to work well and honestly so that we can take pride and satisfaction from it and by so doing enjoy our leisure and our rest. There's the happiness that should come from being with our friends and our neighbors. And the thoughtful person finds happiness in just being alive. He enjoys walking on a sunny day, but he likes to walk in the rain too. He can find happiness from the sound of the surf or the crackling of a fire. Abraham Lincoln said that people are about as happy as they make up their minds to be. And that seems to be it, the making up of the mind. Happy people are happy most of the time, and it must be because they just made up their minds that the alternative doesn't hold much hope or fun. If a person must wait until something happens to him to make him happy, he's not going to get much fun out of life. Happiness should not be just the reaction to an outside stimulus. Rather, it should be a state of mind, a regular condition that will fail at times because of unfavorable outside stimulus. Now, when you practically tear your little toe off walking barefoot through a darkened room, you're not going to be the happiest person in the neighborhood for the next 10 minutes. Life is full of things that can cause our happiness, our sense of well-being, to evaporate for a while. Knowing that sorrow and disappointment are natural and inevitable conditions of life, let's let them be the stimuli to break our happiness, rather than leaving it the other way around, the way so many seem to have it. So, be happy now. A person can go a long way toward alleviating and understanding his discontent if he will understand the perverse nature of the human being. When a person works too hard or just works for a long, steady time, he becomes discontented and wants rest and relaxation. When he relaxes too long, he seeks work. When he's around too many people for too long, he longs for solitude. When he's alone too long, he longs for human companionship. The young envy the older person and long for the years to quickly pass. The older envy the young and often wish they could somehow turn back the clock of time. You'll be a lot happier and have a much better sense of humor if you'll understand that it's an integral and indissoluble part of human nature to become dissatisfied, to want what you don't have at the moment. Moments of complete and blissful satisfaction are wonderful but rare, and soon give way to a nagging desire for something else. And that's good. If we understand this part of ourselves, we can avoid frustration. It is this godlike discontent that lurks in the growing person that's responsible for all human progress. That our discontent is also responsible for a great deal of pain and unnecessary suffering is simply the other side of the coin. Do you remember the old fable about the fisherman who caught a magic prince in the form of a fish? And the fish told the fisherman that if he let him go, the fish would grant any wish. The fisherman let him go, talked it over with his wife, and they started wishing. Each time their wish was granted, they'd then wish for something greater. Finally, they lived in a great, gleaming castle with hundreds of servants. But it wasn't enough. The wife wanted then to control the sun, to make it obedient to her whim. And when the fisherman asked for this wish, the finny prince was disgusted and took away everything. They were once again in the simple shack. Like so many old fables, it's a commentary on human nature, and it comes uncomfortably close to the truth. We say, if only I had such and such, I'd be completely happy for the rest of my life. It isn't true. As soon as we have such and such for a while, a surprisingly short while, we then want something else. Discontent comes with the territory. It comes with being human. Are you discontented? If you are, that's good. That's why we're not still squatting in a filthy, drafty cave and grunting and scratching. Divine discontent, to understand it, is to use it properly. The first step to real professional-type, solid, unremitting misery is to get all wrapped up in yourself and your problems, real or imagined. Become a kind of island surrounded on every side by yourself. By turning all of your thoughts inward upon yourself, you can naturally not spend much or any time thinking of others and other things. And so finally the outside world, the real world, will disappear into a kind of Hitchcock-type fog. You'll know the world is there because every once in a while you'll bump into it. But for the most part, it will be murky and indistinguishable. And it's right here that you have to understand an important but little-known fact. The type of person who turns inward upon himself doesn't have much in the wisdom department, or he'd never do it. And as a result, he doesn't have much to turn inward upon. He finds a kind of vacuum. So he must then invent things. And he invents things like, the world is against him, which is the worst possible kind of conceit. The world isn't against him, it doesn't even know he exists. And as a result, it ignores him completely.
So since this person doesn't get much attention from this attitude, he tries to get attention through various other means. One is to hunt for illnesses of various kinds. If you look long enough, and it doesn't take long, you can find symptoms of any condition or disease known to man, and some that are unknown, ranging from yaws to rabies. With your newfound illness, you've got something with which you hope to make everyone else as miserable as you are. So you tell them about it. They don't want to hear about it, but you tell them anyway. And you watch for signs of sympathy. And at first you get them. So you think you've got it made, and you keep this up, with new and interesting medical problems. You wake up every morning feeling rotten, and you let the world know about it. But soon you detect a change. People begin to walk away as you approach. They don't want to hear your deadly recitation anymore. Even your family turns an uninterested deaf ear to your protestations of being on the brink of a slow and painful death. Well, this makes you angry. So childlike, you cry out that nobody cares whether you live or die, and by this time you're pretty close to the truth. So the bitterness deepens, the misery thickens, and you draw farther and farther back into your cave, shouting imprecations at the world, throwing an occasional stone at a passerby, and in general, making a complete ass of yourself. Well, there you have it. One of the best and most common formulas for being miserable, and making those around you miserable as well. And it all starts with becoming too wrapped up in yourself, feeling that you're important somehow. Samuel Johnson wrote, "Many of our miseries are merely comparative. We're often made unhappy not by the presence of any real evil, but by the absence of some fictitious good."